Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Appliance Advisers with Yale Appliance. My name is Francesco, joined as always by Vice President of Sales, Dennis McDonald. How you doing this week, Dennis?
I'm doing great, Fran. How about you?
Not too bad, not too bad. First off, I just got to say it. We were so gung-ho last week, last Thursday. Go Celtics. We felt so good about it. Yeah, no, not so good. That did not go well. I just want to let everyone know we're typically smarter with appliances than we are with our sports predictions. So, you can definitely listen to us here on our appliance advice. Maybe not so much on your on who's going to win the game or not, but
Yeah, I mean, we have to fall on that sword. We were pretty bold in our prediction and came back to bite us. But we live another day, and there's always next year, right?
There we go. It's always next year. So, last week we kind of switched it up a little bit, and we did the format kind of slightly different. We decided to kind of pick some of the most popular categories and really dive deep. And last week, we really went through everything about professional ranges when it comes to sizes, brands, features, service, delivery, all those things. So we're going to continue on that theme for this week. And this week, we're really going to talk about another really, popular category and one that we do get a lot of questions, and that's counter depth refrigeration and specifically freestanding counter depth refrigeration. So, just to start off, overall, what is freestanding and what is counter depth? What does that mean?
Sure. So, counter depth is just that. The word counter is important there. So standard counters in a kitchen are 24 inches deep. Traditionally, refrigerators that most of us grew up with were what were considered freestanding, in that those refrigerators they vary in depth, but many times were much deeper than 24. They might have been 30, 28, 33. They stuck out beyond the cabinets. For the longest time, the idea of a really tight refrigerator that really looked really clean were only the really high-end, super expensive ones that most of us couldn't afford. So counter depth came out probably about 10 years ago now, and really afforded people the benefit of a cleaner aesthetic. And we'll see. Nate's already in, man. He already has his first question in there about, hopefully we talk about things other than aesthetics. But for most people, initially first, it certainly is aesthetic, right? Clean linear lines is a design trend that people generally prefer than things sticking in and out within the kitchen. So this idea of counter depth, that the body of the refrigerator, the physical body, the sides and the back, are covered flush at 24 inches. You then do, however, have the depth of the door, and they vary. Some refrigerators are 3 inches. Heck, some of them now that have a lot of bins on the door of the actual bins or storage on the door are closer to 35.5 inches themselves, 5.5, the physical door. So they're getting deeper and deeper and deeper. But that idea that it really keep it flush and tight. Now, to Nate's point, let's just get there for Nate, because he was in early with the hot question. He really wants to make sure. The biggest reason why I feel counter depth refrigeration is a strong consideration for anybody, I think a couple of things. You spend the same amount for cabinets, and you do get that cleaner look. I do believe that most people, if they really think about the way they use their refrigerator today, that deeper or what we call freestanding style refrigerator, would agree that most of the food that is in that further back, that extra deep portion of the fridge, that back quarter of the fridge, gets buried. It's hard to see. Many times it gets forgotten about. And when you pull it out, it's too late. And I also think people tend to go to the market more often nowadays and buy fresh food more often. So they're not necessarily always putting quite as much in there. And then we put islands in every single kitchen. I mean, really, we are cramming islands. It's just a trend. So when you think about the depth difference, and when we really think about, we talked about the depth, but today, a counter depth refrigerator, overall depth may be somewhere, inclusive of the door, of somewhere between 27 to 28.5 inches of total depth, front to back. A standard refrigerator or a freestanding refrigerator may be closer to 34, 35 inches deep.
Yeah.
Now that doesn't sound like a heck of a lot. We're talking about 5-6 inches maybe, but when we're factoring in walking around these islands, think about these doors that when you open the fridge, if you really have that extra deep fridge, you've created a quagmire. People can't get around you. You've really blocked off the kitchen whenever that refrigerator door is open. No one can sneak by you to get something. Or more so, it just makes it really tight to move around. So beyond the aesthetic value, and I think it certainly makes a kitchen look much more custom for, quite frankly, today, not any more money most of the time. You can get countertop refrigerators very inexpensively, but also the functionality and flow behind that island make it really a nice feature as well.
Yeah, and like you said, some of these smaller kitchens, galley kitchens in the city, things like that. That 5-6 inches is everything really when you're kind of trying to create and design a functioning kitchen. And you kind of really talked about the difference of standard depth and counter depth. We want to show you too. So we're going to show you something really from our Hanover showroom, and this is kind of just to be able to see and to envision exactly what Dennis is seeing. And you can see on the left-hand side what your counter depth fridge is going to look like. That really nice, clean look. You're only seeing the door. You don't see any of the casing of the refrigerator, and it makes it look really built in. Now on the right side, we took that same refrigerator, you can see how that refrigerator would look in a full depth application. So that extra 3, 4, 5 inches, depending on the brand and the size, you can really see how different that looks. And, really you lose that kind of clean built-in look in the kitchens when you do it that way.
Now, truth be told, someone's going to say, and they're not wrong, there are ways to take the curse off of that standard depth refrigerator so you don't see the sides. And what you're doing in that case is you're pulling out all those cabinets and you're creating bigger end panels or side panels. And the upper cabinet is being pulled out and set further to the front so that you're covering that extra 6 inches, right? But there again, you still created a much deeper aesthetic line, and you still had that issue of impingement on an island conceptually.
Yeah.
So there's also absolutely times where a standard depth refrigerator, you have that space, you have an alcove, it makes a lot of sense. And then you do a standard fridge. This isn't to say one or the other, but it's to understand that vernacular that we throw around because we're in the business and you're into the buying market for the first time. And you may just think, oh gosh, if you're a standard American, here's what you want. You want bigger. We don't know why, guys. Really, if you really think about it, you don't need bigger. We don't need 3-row SUVs, but we drive them, right? So the point of the fact of the matter is, if ever asked, most people say, hey, do you want more space? Well, of course you do. Do you want more cabinets? Of course you do. Do you want more counters? The answer is yes. The point I'm saying is, we don't know why. It's just we're Americans. We like big. I think form and function, and that's where you got to make that checklist for yourself of depth. Is that impingement of extra deep going to bother me? Do I like not having to pay for extra cabinets to pull that cabinet out? Do I feel like I can make it feel more custom and more like a Sub-Zero or a Thermador that's a little tighter to the cabinet for not spending any more on my cabinets? So that's your decision to make, but it's our job to articulate why you'd make it one way or the other, right?
All right, very good. So next thing, obviously different sizes. These they come in a lot of different widths, heights, things like that. Let's talk to me about some available sizes. What is the most common size?
Yeah, so I mean, let's talk about the standard size, the industry quote unquote standard. And by that we mean where 90% of production will fit. And that is a 36-inch wide opening. Okay, so that means your cabinets inside to inside, 36 inches, a very standard order, 36 inches wide. I always tell people to go 72 inches tall in a counter depth refrigerator. The reason for that is there are common heights can still be 70 or 72 inches. The trend, again, because we're always going to try to get a little bit bigger, like we said, right, is more units trying to get to 72 inches because they want to be able to claim they have a little more cubic footage than the next person, or so on and so forth. And so I say plan for 72, because if that's the way we see the market trending, these fridges last 7 to 10 years, right, if things go well. And God forbid you have a beautiful kitchen, you go to take it out, and you've only planned for 70, and the market moves to 72, you have an issue. But it's really easy to plan for 72 and have the cabinet person produce a filler strip, a 2-inch filler strip, or just a filler strip, and they cut it down to your fridge. So you always have that flexibility of framing and planning for 72, putting in a filler in. It looks green. I mean, it looks great. You don't have a big gap up top. You still have that clean line, but you have the full flexibility of the next time you're in the market, if you want to go bigger, you haven't said, wow, man, I really am in a pickle now. I don't have a lot of options because there's very few producers of 70, which brings us to the bigger issue is there's very few producers of refrigerators in the world. Lots of brands, but there's very few actual factories. So we believe the trend already is 75, 80% heading to 72, if not already at 72 only. So there's fewer and fewer options at 70. But that's why I say 72. I talk a lot about it, but it's important. It's a big mistake people make.
I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, it's something we hear every day. You know, every customer who's looking, you know, a replacement refrigerator, it's something that you always have to think about. And a lot of times, you know, we run into this all the time where customers had an old, some of them even shorter, you know, they might have a 69-inch height or a 69-inch cutout on some of these. And as we know, on a lot of appliances, just over time, they tend to get a little bigger. The sizes change. That is one of the number one pieces of advice you can give someone that's building a new kitchen, remodeling, is absolutely do that 36 by 72 cutout. Like you said, it's going to save you a lot of headaches down the line for sure.
Yeah, and then you asked about available size. So that we talked about the standard being 36 by, say, 70 or 72. My recommendation being 72. Also understand there's niche players in all of that.
Yeah.
So, you know, historically they follow 3-inch increments. So there's 36 is generally the biggest counter depth. Then they go down to 30. There are a few options at 33 inches of width. There's a few options at 30 inches of width. And then there are a few absolute, generally European-made brands that have some niche sizes. I mean, we have a 28-inch wide top mount refrigerator. There are some oddballs out there, but that's really where you're working with your appliance person. I always just generally tell people this again. Remember, while many of us, you may look at your kitchen and say, I don't need a 36-inch space. Maybe my lifestyle only needs 33 or it needs 30. That's fine for you. But if resale is ever in your near future and you're not saying this is the be all and end all and I'm here, two things. That person coming in may say, wow, I really wanted a 36-inch fridge, and that because that is the industry standard. Or moreover, you've planned for these 33 and 30s that are more niche in options. There's only a couple.
Right.
And what if people get out of that category? There's not more people getting into that category. There's a couple that are in that category today. And I would wonder and challenge you to say, if we believe a recession's coming and all those things are happening for us, the first things they cut are the non-standard sizes. So I think it makes a whole heck of a lot of sense, when possible, to stick within the standard size, to give yourself max flexibility, max options of price point, so on and so forth.
Absolutely. So we talked about sizes, and now, you know, there's also a lot of different styles, and you kind of alluded to it a little bit, and we'll show you this as we go through it too here, and all the different options that you have in styles of refrigerators. So if you want to kind of take us through some of this here.
Yeah, I mean, so left to right, kind of the classic counter depth. The number one style you sell is what we call a French door, simply meaning that split upper door. Why did they split the door up top? Remember, again, we talked about islands, right? We're talking that this unit's 36 inches wide. That's what we said was the standard. Yeah. Well, a 3-foot wide door, if it were a single door swinging into your island, to code, most codes only call for 40 or 42 inches of clearance between your island and your rear wall of cabinets. So if we imagine that this is 3 feet, it leaves you 3 or 4 inches to even open that door. So the split door made a lot of sense, really only coming out 18 inches into the space. And then the pull-out door bin seemed to make sense. So that's kind of what we consider, and we use the vernacular French door. Now, whether it's ice and water in the door, those are options you could ask for or not. There's options both ways. Then you look to the right and you see a double drawer French door. Kind of been a popular trend that we've started to see. Some people like it, and why do they like it? Well, you know, some people really like that organization, and that third, let's say not the lowest draw, the draw kind of in that middle, many times is what they'd call a food pantry. Some people use it for extra produce space. It has generally the flexibility, a lot of them in temperature, to do anything from meats and cheeses to produce to, you know, so it's kind of how you dream it up to use it. And then that bottom draw traditionally would be your freezer draw. Now, again, those are decisions we'd be asking you, well, do you use your freezer a lot? Do you have a second freezer maybe in the garage? Would more fresh food storage make sense? Right? And then you have, so that's kind of what we would call a double door French draw, right? And then you go to the right, what we call a quad door or a 4-door French door. There's been a trend we've started to see, really started to come out by the Korean companies. You know, you saw LG do it, Samsung do it. There's more and more players doing it. Now you'll even see brands like SKS coming out with it. Why would someone want that? Well, again, the split upper top for ease of use and space into the space. Some people just don't like a draw. I mean, there's some people that don't The draw happens to put them in a precarious situation of bending over at your knee level and reaching down.
Yeah.
If you have a bad back like I do, I'm fortunate enough that I can get to the left or right of the fridge if I have one of those days where my back feels really tight and kind of kneel down at the side, which is fine. But some people just don't like the idea of having to bend over a draw. And that split door, being able to kneel down and have access to it, would make a lot of sense, as you see in the 4-door French door model. As well, some of these have often, and even in the double draw French door model, there's this trend to start to do what we call a combi draw, or the idea, a convertible draw. The ability to have it be refrigerator when you need it and freezer maybe when you need that. You know, it gives you some flexibility to toggle between fridge and freezer. Now, the obvious thing is there's some work in there, right? The fresh food's going to have to come out. You're going to have to turn it down, wait till it freezes, put it in. Yes. But some people definitely seasonally might say, hey, in the winter, I don't like to go out quite as much. I tend to buy more frozen food and I'll defrost it and eat in. And they might say, but in the summer months, I really like the ability to have more fresh food and I like that convertibility. So that's also a trend that you have within the units that are kind of unique. But that's really the three main categories. Now, there are top freezers. There's one that is counter depth, and it's by a brand called Beko. It's only 28 inches wide. Again, one of those niche players. And here we go. Wow, you teed me right up for it. And then really what we're going to here, looking at this slide, is what we would consider traditional refrigerators, and the three categories that we would talk about, which would be that top mount being freezer up top, fridge below, bottom mount being just that, the freezer is on the bottom, fridge up top, and then finally that side by side, which, by the way, the side by side is a dying animal. I mean, I say it very slowly because there's only a couple of them left. We're kind of looking at a soon to be extinct model, in my opinion. There'll be one or two. And why did that go away? Well, that's really what drew the craze of ice and water in the door, right? I mean, that fridge is what 80s and 90s, man. If you had a side by side, you had arrived. You had a great kitchen. You were crushing ice, and all your friends wanted to come over and hang out, right? But I'll also say what we do know about food is wide, not tall, right? And think of it, again, I come back to carbs. I have, we all work through our demons here, but, you think of a pizza box, you think of a platter of food, you think of a dinner plate. And if you've had a side-by-side, I'll just say the word and you'll know the juggling act. You're taking that plate of food and you're trying to kind of stick it on top of the bottles of things, and can it sit without, and certainly, the sheet panel lasagna, or when you had a party over, you had to convert everything to smaller drawers. Now, some people like that. They like that organization and they're willing to do all that. Fast-paced Americans, they just tend to see that they want to go quick. And when it doesn't fit, it frustrates. So you're seeing this trend to bottom mount freezers, and then certainly into counter depth refrigeration. Some people will ask us, and I think it really, if you're down south and you're in a market where floor plans are wide open and maybe large single floor plans with tall ceilings and wide open spaces, and it's 2,000 square feet of just wide, well, then absolutely in some of those cases we see deeper fridges, because space is not an issue. But for 90% of Americans, if we did a poll, they would say that they wish they had more space in their kitchen. Most people don't say I have too much space. And for those folks, counter depths to us in a selling trend are almost 90% of what we sell in that space. Not because we're Yale, but we also happen to be in more of a metro market. And we certainly have suburban stores and everything else, but in those metro markets and whatnot, space is a commodity. I think it is for even most people in the design.
Yeah, definitely. And you talk about the side-by-side kind of being a thing of the past. It's almost like, those 4-door French doors. Part of that, too, is that organization you were talking about. A lot of people, what you hear sometimes in the French door, it's almost like, people going from top load to front load for the first time. When they went from side-by-side to French door, bottom mount for the first time. Sometimes you notice in the freezer, you have that big bin and a lot of space, but some people will say, oh, maybe the organization's tough, digging through it, like you said. That 4-door kind of helps to take away some of that. And those two individual compartments are really with shelving, with nice drawers, things like that, in the freezer, of course. And that kind of helps you kind of keep that freezer section a little bit more organized also there too. But so now, we talked about all the different styles and sizes and things like that. Let's talk price points. Kind of what are we looking at price point here? What's the range on some of these refrigerators?
I mean, listen, we talked about a top mount refrigerator. That first one, you can get in the 700s, 799, 849 kind of price range. We see those a lot actually go. We see them in smaller spaces in cities. We see them a lot of times in garage applications or in a pantry situation because they're not deep, they're small, and they do everything that someone needs to do. You can get an ice maker or not an ice maker. It's just an option. So we see them as close as that. But the running average, I would say, countertop refrigeration today, depending on timing, you get anywhere from a rough average of $15.99. They can absolutely go up at the really high end at, say, like a Thermador at 5,000. But I would say the meat of the market is, say, 2,000 to 3,000 is the meat. That is where you have lots of options and probably good ones. And then from 3 to 5, what are you getting? They're not putting in a new compressor in most cases. There are a couple that have unique sealed systems and how they work. But in most cases, you're getting lighting, a little more fancy racking, aesthetics, maybe a brand name, all the basics that we'd kind of know as consumers. But they didn't rebuild the engine, in most cases. Yeah.
All right. And then we'll talk about some of these features too. So, within some of these brands, and some are unique to certain brands, some just call it something different, but they're, obviously very similar features there too. So let's talk about some of the kind of the unique things that we see in kind of depth refrigeration, really kind of as we move forward. Obviously, we're always constantly seeing new features being kind of born into these too. So we'll talk about those. And kind of one of the first ones we'll talk about, and, we talked about this with other categories at times too, is kind of smart technology. Is that anywhere in refrigeration? Like, where do you see that right now in refrigeration?
Listen, we had a bunch of designers in last night, and we were kind of doing, it was a great event, and we were talking and we were just talking about trend, right? And smart came up as a theme.
Yeah.
And truth be told, it's not a driving factor in buying purchases for most folks. Do I think someday it will be there? Absolutely. Today, it's kind of a nice to have, but I don't think people make the buying decision 99.9% of them based on the technology. And the main reason for that, and you guys could weigh in on that, until all these apps, everyone has too many apps and everyone has too many logins. And by the time you're done doing that, good Lord, you're just going to open your fridge and figure it out. I think they're good concepts, but until they mesh and truly, and listen, this is way outside of my league. I told you I sell appliances. we're certainly not going to solve this today. But until they can create networks where your Ring doorbell and some brands are going to do that. I'm an appliance guy. I'm thinking about Samsung has a Ring feature, but Google Assistant, everyone has their own apps and platforms and type of Bluetooth technology they use in their home. There's endless amounts of names. And until that kind of all comes in under one hub in an easy to use, in the box button that works for many of those things across multiple platforms. I don't know today that in things like refrigeration are really making a compelling enough story to do it. Where it is kind of cool, in some cases we have people that maybe have a vacation home, aren't at home as often. They have power outages a lot. It's a second home, and they go up there seasonally, and maybe they turn the fridge way down or way up because they don't want to store it, they don't want to waste the energy. But now they're coming home, or they turn it off. And now they want to turn it on. People that store wine. Some people really have a lot of wine. There's wine coolers out that have Wi-Fi technology to let them know, hey, your temperature's dropping. There is some technology and work being done by brands like GE and a few of the others where actually it's proactive service where if you have to opt in, but if you would say, hey, we want you to monitor my fridge, okay, how cool is this? And figure out if this thing's about to break, they're going to send yield apart. Before you even know what's about to break. It's working as far as you're concerned, but they're seeing indicators. Imagine if the car industry could do this. Yeah. And literally, they're going to call you and say, Mr. Froyo, we just found out that your we just got an alert, your refrigerator thermostat, we believe is about to go on your fridge. We've already pre-ordered the part. Yale has it, and they can schedule you in the next 48 hours. We do that today with certain brands.
Yeah.
We're hooked into that. I think that's where smart may have a case. Then it's the fact of privacy, and some people like that, and some people don't. So it's a big thing. I think it will be there.
Yeah.
I don't think for most it's the reason why they buy the fridge. They're asking us a lot of other questions about the fridge first.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not like you said, the technology is not quite compelling enough yet to make it a true real buying decision for most people there. So what some brands are doing, kind of really talking about food preservation here, a brand like Beko has really done a nice job with their food preservation and something that they call EverFresh. Talk to me a little bit about that and how does that kind of help keep the food fresher longer, specifically produce, vegetables, things like that?
Yeah, that's where we really talk about it. It's not just Beko. Bosch has a cool story there. But Beko certainly has a thing called EverFresh. And basically, to this point, it was lighting, right? And the lighting in their produce drawer specifically, or in their fridge in general, it had ambient light that helped with the carbon and the breakdown of food, really trying to keep that food, because light has a big effect on a lot of things, whether it's wine, food, water, and that incandescent or LED lighting that's in there is not always the best for preserving, right?
Mhm.
They have a new technology coming out called EverFresh. And really what it does is it tries to mimic the 24 hours in a true day. If we were outside, right? So if you were growing produce in your garden, we would realize that the sun has a synthesis and it kind of goes around a clock, and over 24 hours, they are mimicking that now in their new refrigerator, where that will change colors. Not for the wow factor of, hey, it's purple inside, trying to mimic the natural light that you would get truly in its natural state outside. They believe that will hold the food longer. And in some of our, we'll be launching in the next couple of weeks some results from our most recent, what we call Project Produce, where in here we do just that on certain brands and test this type of technology. When we video it, and it's a daily log and a whole forum, and we will really share with you some of the ones that ranked well and did all the things they said, and some of the others that maybe don't. But this new EverFresh is about to hit the market. They've had a really, actually, in our last product, Produce did great. Now, Bosch does it a little bit differently with 2 separate compressors. So the last thing I'll say, and then I want to get to some of these good questions, that compressors historically in refrigerators work like this. You have one compressor. It is your freezer compressor. It keeps that ice cold freezer temperature, which is important, cold. And as you open your refrigerator 15, 20, heck, if you have kids like me, feels like 100 times a day, they're in and out of there. Then what happens is there's a damper between the fridge part of your refrigerator and the freezer part, nothing more than a damper. And it opens and it allows the freezing cold air that it is generated to cool the freezer. And that damper, when it needs it, the thermostat calls for it, and it drops that cold air into your warmer refrigerator to bring the temperature down. So what happens? Warm air meets cold air. 7th grade math, Fran, what do you get? Warm versus cold.
Fog.
Condensation was the right answer, but listen, you could get fog, I suppose. But condensation happens, and that transfer of cold and warm air is just what really breaks down food. So freezer burn in your freezer, we can all understand, because it's that transfer of warm and cold coming together. Sub-Zero had the story forever, where it has 2 compressors, one maintaining constant freezer temp, that's all it controls. One maintaining constant fridge temp, that's all it controls. There are no dampers. This is a sealed unit, and it literally was working to try to keep constant temperature, not big fluctuations, and moisture out of the food. Well, Bosch has replicated that in a counter depth refrigerator.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
and that's a big deal. So the second part to that is one compressor, in theory, is always working to cool the fridge or the freezer. Now you have 2 compressors. It would make sense that they're working, each of them are working half as hard, right? Because they're just trying to zap and keep that constant temperature. So that's kind of that. Fran, is it okay by you? Because I know it's a big day. You have earphones in, by the way, that I don't have. You're really stepping up your game. Next week, I'm going to bring something, but can we get to some of the questions here?
Absolutely.
And I think we answered Nate's, and we hopefully are starting to talk about the things other than aesthetics. But thoughts on, Logan asked a question on thoughts on True 36 over under. Now, that's not really counter depth. That's a built-in product you're talking about, Logan. Brand new. Am I excited about? Sure. We're excited about most things True puts out. Having said that, I think on first take, I will also tell you we're probably the only store in the country that has them on display, or one of the first couple. But I think it's exciting. I think it's good to have another high-end brand in it. I'll tell you, in the short time True's been out, I think they've done a lot of really great things. They push themselves. They certainly have a heritage in commercial, and I think it's exciting. It's also expensive, but the quality is certainly there too, with the components and the steels and so on and so forth. So I think they can command it. We sell that brand quite well for the customer that really wants the top of the top. And we think it is a real player, and to see them into the main space. Up to this point, they did under-counter units, wine coolers, kind of all-in-one units, but this is their first foray into that more traditional bottom freezer meat of the market, and I think it could be exciting for them. Mm-hmm. Cyril says, it seems to me that refrigerators are still being affected pretty heavily by supply chain issues versus other appliances, and I see higher prices and fewer sales. Do you see this as well, Yale? Listen, I see higher prices on everything. And certainly we're heading into something, and I don't think that's going to change a whole heck of a lot, but because I think that they have years of backlog, okay? And I think it's still supply and demand. I think until that changes, I also think this, right, Cyril, to be quite honest, appliances haven't gone up in cost. They have been static. I mean, in this business, if it has been pre-COVID, over 10 years, if you had over 10 years, maybe a 10% price increase in total, that would be a lot. That's not a lot. And everything else in our life rises, right? And I always bring it back to that over-the-range microwave you bought 20 years ago was $700, and today they're $200. So in many cases, they become deflationary. So I think these corrections, honestly, while painful for all of us being consumers in certain parts of our consumer stream of things that we buy, is to realize that they're making up for probably all the years of wrong or not being able to increase prices. So my honest guess is I don't think we're going to see prices come down. I think if anything, they will, and we continue to get price increase, they will rise. Now the market and inflation at some point has to correct, but I don't think you're gonna see significant discounts. I think you may see some promotion, but I also am telling you, I don't see that for a couple of years because the supply chain is still that fractured. Yep. Okay, I mean, I'll give you this. Many of our things are coming out of market. Bosch stopped taking dishwasher orders. Miele stopped 7 months ago. Can't order one. Anyone tells you they can't, they are lying. Call me, put me on the phone, 3-way conversation me in. Call Miele and say, hey, is it true they can place an order? They can't. It's also true that they may have one. Someone canceled one. Or like us, we ordered them 2 years ago predicting this, and we got some things wrong, but maybe we think we got this right, and we should hopefully have our fair share and have been able to. But a brand like Bosch stopped taking dishwashers, and truth be told, they won't even be able to take orders again, and this is gray, maybe till the end of July, and they won't be able to produce a new one when ordered in July for 13 months from then. So think about it. In many ways, parts of our lives are getting somewhat normal. We're still dealing with it, but that's how fractured it is. So I want to tell folks like Cyril, if you're waiting for that big sale, folks, this isn't even selling anymore. This is just being honest. You may have the exact opposite happen. You know, I don't see that relief coming anytime soon. Honestly.
All right, very good. And the final point that I want to touch on here, just with the counter depth refrigerators, is delivery, install, service. Some important things to know there. And refrigerators we talk about all the time. It's really one of the largest, heaviest, most difficult things that we can deliver, and especially when you're in the city and things like that. What are some things that people should do to kind of prepare for that?
Well, I mean, the obvious one. Listen, we say this, folks, but you're smart people. You're here. You're asking questions. You're doing research, as you should, because these are big purchases and that are the heart of your home, and they're things you use a lot, and you should make a good decision. But make a good decision. You need to buy items like this, these major appliances in COVID, particularly from someone that can fix it. Because I'll also tell you, it is not. We are one of the largest servicers in the United States. Period. End of story. We have been doing it for 100 years next year, not servicing, but servicing for a good 30 now. We are in that business. We lose money doing it, but it is an absolute cost of good experience, which we think through good times and bad of economic downturns and good times, and with big giants like Home Depot and Lowe's and internet, and at the end of the day, smart people will realize, no, this stuff breaks, and when it breaks, I want to call the person I went to. And I think in COVID, as much for someone that's all in it, I can tell you it's very hard. And if you don't have service, that 1-800 number doesn't work anymore. You might say, I'll call the manufacturer. They don't have techs. You can't get techs. You wouldn't, it's a race. You can't, unemployment's at an all-time low. You can't pay people enough. They're changing, it's just a hard time, and you can't get the parts to fix. So I'd always say, make sure they service it, please. I don't care what market you're in. I mean, a lot of the folks talking to us aren't even in our market. That's just me to you, and we don't ship to your market if you're outside of our local, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, parts of Connecticut area. If you're further than that, then we're not for you, but that's just advice. And then on the delivery side, you really want to make sure that whoever's delivering it, again, is affiliated with the company you purchased it. We all are consumers and deal with the pass the buck. Well, you'll have to call the delivery company. Oh, wait a minute. When I bought it, you didn't tell me that. You just said you had delivery. No one told me. And you're educated, so ask those questions. When it breaks, do I call you and do you handle it? Hopefully that place should say yes.
Yeah.
When I need delivery, I call you. Do you schedule it? Appliance companies will say yes. Okay, something goes wrong. Do I call you and do you fix it? Is it your delivery team? Or are you going to then tell me you have to check with the delivery team? Like, that's what you need to look, because things go wrong. They're big, heavy appliances. And finally, installation. This is a counter depth market. There may not be a ton to it, but it's making sure that whoever installs, many of these have water lines and those types of things, that they're insured. And we don't do any of this to strike fear, because it should be an exciting time buying these appliances, but make sure you finish your research on the company you're buying it from. Absolutely. Last one, Earl, I think we can get to, Fran. I'm doing it.
Yeah,
and
go for it.
Post it, but are any energy certifications important when looking at refrigerators? It's a little confusing in some, and some no. Cheryl, 20 years ago, yes. And quite candidly, even 20 years ago, in most cases, or certainly the last 15, to buy a Energy Star versus a non-Energy Star appliance, while the right thing to do, I do believe, would never have paid for itself over the life of 7 to 10 years. Right? The Energy Star now, and I say that because 10 years ago, you had that choice. Now, every refrigerator we sell is Energy Star rated. So it's almost like they all are. And when you look across a category, sure, you may do it because it's important to you to make that good decision. And that's a noble and good decision. But I'm going to tell you, when the annual cost and lifetime cost of that appliance today, knowing that everything's Energy Star, when you look into the same category. So if you were looking at Sub-Zero next to Thermador, next to brand X, Y, and Z, in that same category, or I don't care if it's a Maytag and a Manor and a GE, and you're looking at whatever category you're in, you look across them all, the annual cost of ownership might be $1 or $2 difference. We're probably not saving a whole heck of a lot of electricity today, but if you have a non-Energy Star refrigerator still in your home, then yes, absolutely. It would then pay for itself. If you have a fridge that old, to get an Energy Star anything would save you a lot of money if you happen to still have a non-Energy Star fridge today. But when shopping today, brand to brand to brand, I think it's a whole lot of marketing spin and not a whole lot of savings. Definitely. Hopefully that answers your question.
And then one final note I just want to mention too on delivery as well. We talk about how difficult and the sizes and fitting it in. One thing that we offer are complimentary site checks. So especially where we do so many deliveries in the city and you're going up multiple floors and things like that, our guys will come out, they'll measure the doorways, they'll measure the space, they'll measure the stairways at the angles and things like that. If you have any tight spaces, you should absolutely be asking the people that you're purchasing the appliance from, do you do site checks? Can someone come out and just confirm that this is actually going to, one, fit in the space, and two, even make it to the space and get through the doorway, get up the stairs? Because that's the part of it too, is you don't want to get stuck with something that doesn't fit, or that's when damages can happen and things like that. So absolutely something I encourage you to ask the people that you're purchasing from there.
Absolutely. And Don Washington, I'll just acknowledge before we hang up here, too many apps. I'm with you, Don. I think some of this is a whole heck of a lot of marketing spin, and they want us to think we got to buy it. But, no one wants to cook anyway, certainly in the summer. I will say this, but there are some really cool appliances for reheating leftovers. So you went to that great restaurant and you're in that group that likes to enjoy, and hey, I'll wait for the invite there, but there are some cool things to rehydrate. So, we appreciate the comment, and it's certainly true. So thank you everyone this week, and Fran, thank you to you. And maybe next week I get, I don't know, a microphone or I don't know, some earplugs or something, or earphones or whatever the heck you have on. You're starting to look really techy.
We're going to get IT support over there. We're going to get you all set up. Don't you worry. So again, that's going to do it for this week. So again, we got a lot of really great questions this week, last week, a lot of recommendations last week for what to cover this week. So any suggestions you have, any categories you want to see covered, definitely keep sending those our way, and we'll get to those. So,
and we'd love to know from you guys if this is content you want, if these deeper dives on topic are a nice break from our kind of, fielding all sorts of questions in any random one order. That is, you're building your project. These are things that a lot of people seem to consider. And we want to try to make sure we build that content for you to look back to. So absolutely. Thank you again.
Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next week. Take care.